Namaste and welcome to Youth TV Show. In today's episode, we are relaunching Today's Youth Asia as an international think tank based in Kathmandu. To inaugurate US Asia Futuristic Talk series, we have with us Ms. DEBI Spindelman from Columbia University of New York. She will be speaking on the topic Education and Complexity in Asia and the United States. May I request the chairperson of today's program, Mr. Kesar Kulal, the principal of Budanilkantha School, to open up the session.
After the Second World War, South Asia was branded as a third world. And within a few decades, a few of the countries, namely Singapore, Malaysia, India to some extent, they were able to climb up the rung, and now they are branded as developing nation. Whereas most of the other countries, they still are happy with being branded as the suppliers of cheap labor to the first world. And in these countries, every parent's dream is to send their child to the United States for higher studies, despite the fact that a very few of them return and serves the purpose of the family as well as the nation. So the question is, what are the complexities that lie in the Asian education and the American education system?
The complexities are many. This question hits home for me. One of the biggest challenges, I would say, is really financial. Really, there needs to be something beyond money that brings them back. I'm very enthusiastic about encouraging them to take as many opportunities as they can while they are my student to gain experience outside their home country, so that they have opportunities and a wealth of knowledge to bring back. But I want to speak a little bit further into some of the differences in education systems. Asian students tend to vastly outpace students from the West and elsewhere in the world in maths, in programming, in sciences. Really, this boils down to subjects wherein there's one correct answer and one path to get there. In the US, the fresh ideas and novel analysis is what instructors are asking for, just as much as a correct answer. Our approach with this creative thinking is exciting, but it's not always as grounded in quantitative evidence. So there's a great deal that American and Western educational systems have to learn. And I wanted to talk as well about education. Learning is not something that we stopped doing, that any of us here have stopped doing after we graduated. and anyone who believes that they're all done learning at that point is really selling themselves short and selling short their own potential. I want to talk also about other ways of learning online in a human way as well, our conversation and debate that we have with our friends and our family. Really how the ways in which we learn to navigate the world as we evolve and grow every single day, not just when we are officially a student wearing our student uniform. The complexity that we're all dealing with is something that may not really be something that we can fully learn in a classroom. I believe that hands-on engagement with the world is absolutely critical, and critical throughout the learning process, both formal and informal.
Do you think these Asian countries are reluctant in changing their old patterns, teaching style?
To a certain extent, the existing teaching style, the existing teaching paradigm has paid off well. There are benefits to this.
Teachers have to be playing for
Asian students who have gone on to make exponentially more money has really been a huge reward. In the United States, many computer programmers and those working in the tech world come from Asia. And this is, to a certain extent, the status quo continues because there's been some really great progress and there's been some really great dividends. But now is a time to recognize that if we continue to do what we've always done, we will continue to get what we've always gotten. And now is a time to start breaking out of that and thinking a bit more creatively. So I want to start this discussion by a little bit more of a conversation about the complexity that we've touched on. There are interesting, juicy challenges that we all face that lack one large single cause, and they also lack one large single solution. The silver bullets that we're looking for to solve all of our problems. We're finally recognizing that doesn't really exist. There's an intellectual community that I'm a member of called the Art of Hosting Conversations That Matter. And one of their favorite questions to ask is, how do we need to be together as a community, as a group, as humanity, in order for the situations and the challenges we're facing today to act as springboard to new and exciting opportunities and the world that we collectively want. So with that in mind, I wanted to open the floor and ask, what complex challenges in the world speak to you most powerfully right now and that we might discuss today?
Asia had its own homegrown education, which was best fitted for the culture, geography, for the kind of economy. But then a lot of Asian students had to be recruited by the British military, the British corporations, and there was a huge shift in the education system, which is not in practice anymore, but we still carry on the baggage of the past in our education system. How do we connect that past into the current limitations that Asian education has? And how do you see the role of the US education institutions in the way forward?
The opportunity to bring older ways of learning and more relevant ways of learning back is really the responsibility of those in education in Asia. There can be support and appreciation from outsiders. One of the easiest ways for this to occur is within the informal education sector. Simply because it's easier and faster and more nimble to work outside bureaucracies. So finding ways to work particularly with the most vulnerable youth who are not in school. And almost by definition, this means that the existing schooling system has not served them. And they would be the first ones, ideally, to benefit from a different approach. And particularly ensuring that the results of this education, this return to traditional education, are documented and shared widely, will help the uptake and help as you advocate to mainstream this sort of education into the formal education systems. The British system, which we call in the education world, we call it chalk and talk, the concept of received knowledge. So there is an instructor at the front and they have all of the answers. And they will spit them at you, and the students need to write them down and absorb them. The opportunity for critical thinking, that approach to education has been phased out several decades ago in the United States, and absolutely for the better. And that's one of the reasons that these sort of creative thinking engines, the hubs for innovation that exist in places like New York City, in Silicon Valley, and in Austin, Texas, really are driven by this form of thinking, and we've benefited greatly from that. And the flexibility of meeting students where they are and in their learning style, how they learn best, is something that I believe that Asia and Asian education could benefit from as you also work to bring back the traditional Asian ways of learning and thinking.
How do we create a strong mind? That has been a great challenge. I mean, that relates to students going into depressions, students not having the parental support, not having this imagination, creativity. They fall into trap, they go into drugs, they go into depression. And this challenge, I think, this is a common challenge between both worlds. How do you tackle, how do you address this in the United States?
I think that offering that opportunity for reflection, recognizing, and frequently, throughout the education cycle in particularly, is absolutely important. As educators, we have the opportunity to engage with our students, particularly when they're getting really deep into sort of the granularities of exams and finals. Ask them why they're here. Ask them in particular, one of my favorite questions is tell me about the person that you first encountered that made you want to do this work. Who is the community? Who are the people that made you realize that this is how you wanted to make a difference. And bringing that perspective, particularly in those darker hours, is absolutely critical. I launched an initiative this past fall semester in late December as students were really in exams, so focused on econ problem sets. We put together a page, sentences of remember when this was all a dream, remember when you dreamed of this opportunity to get into this school and to engage with these problems. You did it, congratulations, remember you made it here. Reminding them to think back to why they're here, why this matters. And we papered the entire school with these reminders in bright purple paper. And not only did it lift the spirits of students who had again lost focus of why they were there and were starting to sink into that depression that you mentioned, but the two students that were able to help me with this as well were particularly impacted. Getting to share sunshine and kind of act as a channel for encouragement. There's no way to do that without it affecting you as well.
Do you think that every child is creative, or do you think creativity is something that comes with training and it needs to be practiced? I
genuinely believe in the creative capacity of all children. If you watch a small child who's maybe 3 years old, who has not yet encountered any sort of formal education, and the way they can take a small piece of wood and use it as a car, and then it's a train, and then it's an airplane. That creativity, because no one has told them yet that that piece of wood is not an airplane, is inherent in all of us. And that chalk and talk education that I was talking about tends to diminish that light. Coloring outside the lines is what's brought the most exciting innovations that the world has seen over the last 20, 30, 50 years. Thinking differently about a problem we've all been addressing and all been approaching the same way is that innovation that we need. Teaching students not how to sort of fit it inside a box, but how to apply it, how to mature that creativity and find ways to think through and question and maybe learn that, okay, maybe this piece of wood maybe isn't an airplane, but if I did this and this, thinking through creatively what could happen with it, that's how it turns back into an airplane again.
I think the world faces the challenge of gender inequality, and how do you think that this challenge can be reduced by education?
Gender inequality really looks different in each context. Using the example of Nepal, the issues facing women seeking empowerment in the Terai are very different than in the areas closer to Tibet and to China. There are two pieces of it, in my opinion. One is allowing women to believe in themselves, empowering them to believe that it's worth the challenge of fighting for their education, fighting to stay in school through the challenges, and facing families and communities who may not believe in their ability to do this. There's also a lot of work required within men as well. Fathers allowing their daughters to pursue education, to pursue work outside of their area, believing in them and trusting in them. Beyond education and economic opportunity, safety is important as well. Not just teaching women to protect themselves and to stay safe, but teaching boys and men to not be rapists. Education provides some beautiful opportunities for women once it's accessed, but those intangible bits are really what make it beautiful to be alive, and are more broadly the empowerment of women and of all people that we're all working toward.
As globalization has been an influence in major changes in various sectors, which comes mostly from advanced and influential countries such as United States. With globalization, one of the major sector also includes the education sector, so that the level of education is correlated with education that can be sustainable globally. However, still in our countries, still major portion of the education system carries the baggage of traditional methods and ideologies. So as students, how do we need to tackle these issues so as to become creative and a more critical thinker?
I would say now, 2015 is the most exciting time up until now and in the history of humanity for me to get to answer your question. The digital divide is rapidly shrinking. How many of you have smartphones? Smartish. How many of you have at least periodic access to the internet? Yeah, absolutely. With the advent of massive open online courses, in the US we call them MOOCs for short, that are free for the most part. And these are taught by universities such as Harvard University, Columbia, where I'm from, MIT, and many others. These will bring in some more of the critical thinking opportunities in a classroom setting, using technology, finding ways to be connected and to work on and chew over challenges with people from a variety of backgrounds and a variety of educational systems is one of the best ways to do this. So I'm so happy that you asked me this question now and not 10 years ago.
Isn't a sort of a difference in the complexity of the courses between A-levels and +2 actually limiting the horizons for +2 for international studies?
Yes, I agree very much. These sort of different tracks seem to really work to shape the future of students, not only in the types of work that they're engaging in down the road, but in how broad their horizon is allowed to be. There are opportunities outside of the United States and Western Europe that don't have the same very large price tag attached. But there are so many careers out there that are incredibly fulfilling. I would recommend that students who are not headed in the A-level track to look at lower cost opportunities. And those MOOCs that I mentioned as well, the massive open online courses, allow students for a very small fee, usually I think around the range of $50 US, although it varies, to complete the course for free. But if they would like an additional certification saying that they took this class through Harvard University, open online coursework that they could put on their resume, that sort of investment is absolutely worth it.
What change would you like to see, if any, in the US government's policy so that the Asian countries can benefit from the beauty of the American education system? The
two biggest ways to really open up the US education system for a more globalized economy would be easier access via the student visa and more scholarships that not only cover the cost of education, but costs of living. I don't believe that it's enough to offer scholarships that simply cover the cost of tuition. New York City, for example, is an extremely expensive place to live. And so that means that many of the students, international students in my program, they're still the children of the elites in their country. Families who can afford to send their child somewhere that rent costs $2,000 US per month. Having scholarships that cover that funding as well is absolutely critical. Several of my students have specific conditionalities on their scholarships that they are required to return, typically for 3 to 5 years, to repay, to really engage. That's one of the ways of approaching it. I think that there's a need also for students who are returning home to engage with real critical work. Because if you've headed to the United States, learn this exciting, dynamic way of thinking, and then you come back and, for example, are working in your local government, and it's still moving at the same pace that it always has. And even if students are required after graduation to remain for 3 years, what's to keep them from leaving again immediately as soon as their requirements are up? So these creative hybrid opportunities are, I believe, the future for preventing brain drain and keeping returning students in their home country engaged and working to solve the problems.
First of all, thank you all for being here, and thank you, Devi, for such a great question and answer session and insights, most importantly. Devi in Nepali also means goddess. And there is a goddess called Saraswati, who is the goddess of learning. So it was almost like having you there, true to your name. And it took us 3 years of putting Today's Youth Asia in the back seat when we were at the height of any youth organization in any country can reach. When we were cruising through the VIP of the airports to the president's office, to the prime minister's office, and running a daily television show on the national channel, and we decided it's time to take a break and restructure it, because the constitution of the country is still at halt. We have lost a lot of international contracts that the government had in terms of development and economic education cooperation. So I personally decided that it's time that private group or a small group in Nepal, led by young people, supported by experts from all over the world, can we parallel that? A country with no constitution, a country with no government, can a group of young people with the support of professionals in Nepal and abroad parallel the government and bring in international cooperation and make Nepal a destination for Asian integration? Is it possible? 3 years back, at a time when we had 60 projects running and 100 clients up and coming, we shut it all down. And today, looks like we are back with the concept that Tim and I decided 3 years back. So now the way Today's Youth Asia is going to operate is it's going to be based in Kathmandu. We'll be working a lot on the US and Asia cooperation, having Kathmandu as the base. And that definitely involves our own country, Nepal. And during my own life, since I was 13 years old, and ever since the inception of Today's Youth in 2002, and when we went to Today's Youth Asia in 2007, we have been very lucky to have great support from American citizens, institutions, education institutions, corporations from the US, and including the US government. So we thought we would recognize that openly. And 2 years back, when I was invited to attend President Obama's second inauguration, I was moved by the fact that I was given a seat in the front row. I didn't even have to stand. I was planning to stand among 1.2 million people out there. And during that time, I had a lot of meetings with the global leaders based in Washington, D.C., later University of San Diego, and a few friends even in Hollywood after that. I could sense that in the President Obama's second term, the focus of America will be Asia. It's no longer Europe or South America or Africa in the past. It'll be Asia. And we have seen that with the recent visit of President Obama to India, where I saw him hugging Modi more than Michelle Obama. So that kind of confirmed me 2 years back that this is a huge shift. And the next day of Obama arrival in Delhi, the Pakistani chief of army goes to China and says China as Pakistan's oldest friend. So things are shifting, and I think it's a good timing that we are launching US-Asia Futuristic Talk Series. And when we discuss of US-Asia, I'm glad we started with education, and that too from such a young thinker of the world, I would say. So let's see what we have in the future, and thanks for attending the first program, and let's see where we head out in the next coming years. Thank you.
I believe this discussion was enlightening to you. We will be organizing US-Asia Futuristic Talk Series regularly. You can follow us at facebook.com/todaysyouth Asia. Thank you for watching.